we have got the Instructor Meginar. At least I think we have. Yes, I can see myself live now. We are live with the first ever Instructor Meginar. I only want to do this for the people that care, the people that actually care about the CPD and aren't only interested in a standards check. I don't want to do it for the people that only care about Part 3s and standard checks. I want to do it for people that care about the profession, their job, their livelihood, their career. Now, I should warn you all, actually, that whenever Bob joins, there is always a technical snafu. But we haven't got one today. It's always a technical snafu. There's a technical snafu.
Clap.
Close it down. Close it down.
Well, that's a good start, isn't it? Well, good evening, everybody. You'll have to forgive the mess that is behind me, where we're living in this little tiny corner of the house while walls get knocked down and all sorts of stuff happens. So I want to look at coaching. I see a lot of coaching not done terribly well. And there's mix-ups in people's heads about what it is, what it isn't, what client-centered learning is, and all the various things. And people think if you're coaching, you can't instruct. If you're an instructor, you can't coach. Well, I want to just have a look at what all these roles are and have a look at the best ways I feel that certainly work for me of getting the thing to happen. Now, one of the big things that I hear all the time is that, well, I've got learners you can't do that with. Well, I used to just accept that, but I don't anymore. What I would say to somebody saying that to me now is, well, you've got learners that you can't do that with because you've not learned how to unlock them. Because what happens is they turn up for the lesson and then an instructor suddenly says to them, what do you want to do today? And I thought you'd decide that. So they feel like they're almost ambushed. So I've put a post in the group about contracting. I like to start all of my engagements with new people that I'm working with this, where we set the scene. What do we expect from each other? And again, when I asked that question, to go, well, I don't know. I thought I'd just turn up here and you'd tell me what to do, and then I'd make mistakes and you'd fix them. Because that's what everybody thinks driving instruction is, because that's traditionally what it always was. You know, the test and all the instruction that went around it was all about a fault-based approach. Well, now we're trying to develop skills, knowledge, and understanding. So the Hermes report, the high impact approach for enhancing road safety through more effective communication skills, identified that coaching was the best way to do it, to put the learner at the heart of the process. Now, for me, I mean, coaching can be used for a myriad of different things, but for me, it's all about empowerment of the individual and getting them to own their own learning. If you like, to try and turn every learner into the learners we all love, the ones who come with loads of ideas, who are really engaged and immersed in the process. We don't like the ones who are having it paid for by mom and dad and who don't really want to learn. We know how difficult that can be. So it's about turning them around. So let's have a look at just quickly at what coaching is and probably what it isn't. Now, there's lots and lots of roles that help, inform, educate, or train others, but aren't coaching. For example, mentor, teacher, consultant, therapist, instructor. Now, a lot of these people use coaching techniques, but let's have a look at each of those in turn. So the mentor generally is an expert in the subject that's being taught, if you like, or that's being developed. So an instructor could be seen as a mentor. We offer solutions based on experience. They educate, they put the learning into the learner. And there's nothing wrong with that. The teacher, again, tends to be a subject expert most of the time. They ask questions that they already know the answers to. So they're trying to impart information and knowledge. They educate. Again, they're putting the learning in. So these roles see the learner as an empty vessel. And all we have to do is pour our righteous wisdom and knowledge in until that vessel is full. And that does work. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not really the way human beings learn. They do learn that way, but it's not the ideal way. Consultant, again, they tend to be an expert in the subject, and they analyze the data or the situations. They identify problems, or they have problems identified for them, and they recommend solutions. So again, we're putting learning in, if you like. Therapists, again, it's another role that works one-to-one. They tend to be an expert, but they're dealing in the past. They offer solutions by fixing problems that they uncover. Not necessarily a good thing for driving instructors. We'll be laying them on the sofa and, you know, asking them to explain their relationship with their father. But an instructor, which is what we are, we're expert in the situations that we're in and the things that need to be taught. We offer solutions based on experience, often on our instinct of what that learner might need. We educate, we instruct, we put the learning in. So if it's not those other things, well, what is it then? This coaching malarkey. So the coach empowers people. The coach helps people to identify goals, their goals. What would you like to do today? What would you like to get out of this session? What would you like to get out of the next 5 minutes? The coach helps people discover their own solutions and to formulate plans. Now, that doesn't mean you can't instruct if the learner's stuck and they say, I'm really not sure, I can't think of anything. What do you think? It'd be rude not to answer that question. And there's nothing wrong with that. And instruction can form part of a coaching process. Well, okay, how about I talk you through this? Let's see what we learn from it. That's kind of okay. We help people measure the impact of the goals, the activities that we undertake, and then to set new goals based on that. This is one of the big failings for people on the part 3 and the standards check, although I want to just make that the focus, is that the lesson is not adapted, and the lesson should constantly be adapted. Somebody asked me the question the other day, what happens if the lesson doesn't need adapting? Well, that's a really bad lesson, because all lessons should need adapting, because the pupil should be progressing, or worst case, regressing. So there should constantly be a need to adjust, because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll get what you just got. So something has to change.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the instructor's role and how that is currently seen within the literature. And I would say, you know, you can see in that circle, which is taken from that critical literature review that I spoke about, taking a systems approach, seeing that the individual behaviours in the middle, and actually that social microsystem, so they refer to it, you know, training is vitally important within that. So, you know, thinking through how can driving instructors support in the best possible way based on what we see in the research. So I think one of the key things to say is you are clearly trusted independent advisors to parents and guardians and the students. So you're really well placed to deliver high quality programs. You might have come across the Checkpoints program in the US. As you know, in the US, they have in many different states graduated driver licensing. And as a result, they've often engaged with parents to say, what can you do, parents, to help make sure your students in the first few months of driving are not driving at night and not driving with their passengers, etc. So the Checkpoints program was very much about developing parent-teen driving agreements so that they could come to some sort of agreement in those first few months about what driving was going to look like. And there was a study done about 10 years or so ago, which found that actually when that program was delivered by driving instructors, it actually meant that there was more parent-teen agreements that were agreed. There were greater restrictions on high-risk driving and less high-risk driving occurred. So that kind of shows, I guess, you as an important delivery point for some of those kind of key interventions. Obviously supporting the development of cognitive skills. We've obviously already spoken about how vehicle handling is obviously vitally important, but it's the development of those cognitive skills that is also really key for actually future safety on the road. So visual scanning, hazard perception, road awareness. And we know from existing research that, as I say, in road safety research, often you don't find a lot of effects when you test things. I mean, hazard perception is off the scale in comparison to everything else we look at in terms of being able to teach those skills and actually bring up novice drivers' hazard perception skills to those of experienced drivers in quite short spaces of time. So as much as you can do to encourage them to sit in the vehicle when they're a passenger, when their parents or peers are driving, and actually looking for those hazards, or doing the online skills beyond what they're already required to do would be absolutely great. I would say on commentary driving, some of the research shows that actually that's a really hard thing for learners to do. They're not quite cognitively ready for it yet, and that can be detrimental to safety. So probably best to stick away from that, certainly in the very, very early stages. And finally, providing teaching that's difficult to get by other means. I mean, research has found that parental instruction tends to sit within what they call the safety margin strategy. So it avoids the most challenging aspects of training. So you kind of need both forms of instruction, don't you, to complement each other. The importance of having parents there to get the sheer number of hours on the roads, which people often can't afford to pay for through instruction wholly. You might be aware that in Australia, 120 hours is recommended. It will be very difficult for many people to pay for that numbers of instruction. And I know often there's a concern about, well, will they pick up bad habits and affect their tests? Well, that's potentially a different issue, but we know number of hours on the road is really important to get that experience. And as much as you can do to kind of provide the teaching that is relevant and stretching for them in your time with them, the better. So I'm sure many of you are very aware of the driver, the GDE matrix, the driver education goals, and an Australian study a few years ago showed that driving instructors provided much more higher order instruction than parents, again showing that importance of your role versus that of parents. And you know, looking at the driver, the GDE matrix, thinking about goals for life and skills for living, that was where parents are much less likely to focus. They were much more likely to focus on those vehicle manoeuvring skills.
So garage anxiety. What actually is garage anxiety? So it's not actually a mental illness, it's just a perfect term for what I see on a daily basis, and that is a person that comes to the garage and they have the fear of the unknown almost. They don't know how much they're going to have to spend. They don't actually know what is wrong with their vehicle, and they are in your hands. And most of the time in the garage industry, we have a perception of being con men or being the people who make up prices, take lots of money off people. And that is not true if you go to a decent garage who, like us, are a family business and strive to keep their community safe and just generally are out there to be nice people. So garage anxiety is definitely been heightened since the pandemic. People didn't go out as much, so when they started to go out, they found that the cars had actually worn down a lot more than what they would have done because they were kind of stood, they weren't driving them. Cracks appeared in the tires, mechanical components had slowly kind of deteriorated, so this meant to more money needed to be spent on their vehicles. And I think this has all led down to people being really negligent towards the vehicles. So I constantly promote the fact that garage anxiety is a thing because I see so much of it, and I'm starting to see more of it now in the younger drivers and the drivers who are just passing their tests. And I think a lot of it stems from the parents. I think a lot of it stems from probably like memes on social media where people show things like, oh, just crashed my car, how funny is that? Or just got a blowout, how funny is that? So it leads then to the younger generation being more negligent. They don't really care about what goes on with the vehicle. They don't really care about the tyres. And that leads to neglected vehicles, which unfortunately end up causing issues on our roads. So I hope I've explained that well enough. I have very bad ADHD and dyslexia. So if I read anything backwards on my presentation, then that is why. And I do go off on tangents. If you listen to the podcast that I was on with Terry, you'll understand. So how can you help? So I know most people watching this will be driving instructors. The best thing I can say for you to do to help prevent garage anxiety is to just basically start off from scratch. So all the different behaviours that I see out of drivers has always probably stemmed from, I'll switch that back, stemmed from a possible like influence from a parent, a brother, a sister, a cousin, a foster carer, that kind of thing. And that slowly gets set in their brains of, this is how I'm going to act because that's how my dad used to drive and that's how my mum used to drive. So I think as driving instructors or as anybody who has an influence over people who are just learning to drive, the best thing you can do is bridge the gap between them learning to drive and going to a garage. So for me, it is taking your students to a garage. If you have a reputable garage that you trust, then take them there. You trust them. You go there for your tyres. You go there for your services and things like that. Take them to the garage that you trust and introduce them to the garage managers, the garage owners, and make them feel like it's a comfortable zone, because that is what the whole thing around garage anxiety is. They're worried about where they're going. They're unsure about the environment that they're going into. So therefore, they just don't go. They turn the music up in the vehicles. Things get worse. They ignore the tyre pressure lights. They end up running it flat and have to call out the AA, which causes even more anxiety within them. So giving them that familiarity of a zone, of the people, it would just help so much. We do ladies' nights. We haven't done them for a long time. And it used to work really well. And we did like an evening where we invited 30 women down to the garage. We showed them how to change a tyre. We showed them how to check the oil, the water, the tyre pressures, lots of different things, just to make them feel more comfortable, to make them feel more comfortable coming to our garage and to then be familiar with us. And lots of those people who have come on our courses now come back and have been customers of ours. We've been open 26 years, so they've been customers for a long time now. So the thing I'm trying to start with Fresh Drivers UK, which is how I campaign for road safety, is through my Fresh Drivers UK campaign. I'm trying to encourage the garages who are showing the keen interest in road safety, in tyre safety, and things like that. I'm trying to encourage them to do learn a driver nights. So basically you could take your students there, they would tell them how to change a tyre, check their oil pressures and things like that, and basically set them up for their journey of driving. And they find a garage that they feel comfortable with because they've been there for this evening and things like that.
Because this is the difficult stuff. And Liz referred a little bit to some of this in her presentation. So we all know, hopefully, that 1 in 2 learner drivers fail their first attempt at a driving test. Road traffic crashes are the main cause of death among those aged 15 to 29 years old. 1 in 5 drivers crash within a year of passing their test. And over 1,500 young drivers are killed or seriously injured on UK roads every year. All that data is from Brake, which is a very good organisation on road safety. In 2019, 11,125 new drivers had their licences revoked under the new Driver Act. That was research conducted by the AA Driving School. And I don't mean to be overly dramatic. I'm known for bringing a little bit of drama to proceedings, but you know, this is stuff that we're not talking about. I don't see any of this stuff on Facebook groups. I don't see it in any of the forums. I don't see anyone in the industry who with a large audience. Do you know what? I kind of appreciate that we're preaching to the converted in many ways here, but this is not a main talking point at the moment in the industry. The talking points are standards checks. The talking points are trigger points. And again, back to the drama, none of the people affected in these stats or their families could care less about your standards check. None of them could care less. In the grand scheme of things, and I get you all have industries and livelihoods, we all do. But in the grand scheme of things, this is our job. This is what we should be focusing on. And that's what I'm trying to get, that's what I'm trying to bring a little bit back to in this presentation. So, quick note to Terry, I meant to start a stopwatch so that I would be really focused and really on time. I forgot to start my stopwatch. I'm going to assume I have 20 minutes left. If you're unfamiliar with this diagram represents the safe systems approach. The safe systems approach is kind of leads on from what used to be called the 3 E's around engineering, enforcement, and education. And it's to do with, I'll just go through this, the other areas really quickly. Safe vehicles, obviously airbags, seat belts, automatic braking systems, which are coming in now with technology. Post-crash care, which refers to paramedics and medical advances in treating accidents at the scene, treating victims of accidents at the scene, and the improvements that can be made to save lives, reduce deaths in that way. Safe roads and roadsides is obviously kind of more council-led, but that's a really important part of it. in terms of traffic furniture, roundabout layouts, etc., monitoring sites for accident stats and all that kind of thing. Safe speeds, again, reducing speeds around schools, speed bumps and residential areas where they refer to. And this segment here on safe road use, this is where we live. This is my interpretation of this. This is where we live. But we only occupy a very small segment of this, because if you read the text around the outside, it refers to research and development and transferring knowledge. So as a trainer, as someone who writes training courses, I very much envisage the majority of driver instructors and trainers in a small segment of this, which contains the stuff about behavioural change and coaching, also skills, which is level 1 of the GDE. But we do occupy a small part of this. But that doesn't mean that it's not important. If we think about the other people who are included in these sections, safe roads and roadsides can include the person who's responsible for clearing the verges on rural roads and making sure that the visibility is better than it possibly can be. Post-crash care is paramedics. Safer vehicles is the mechanic who does your VAT. Like a previous speaker who was very eloquent about how passionate she is about road safety. So all these people are really passionate about their jobs, and I have to mention the academics. The stuff that the academics are producing, they've been doing it for years, and it rears its head every now and then and filters down into our industry through things like the Hermes report. And it's great to see Liz on here. Loads of comments on the Facebook group about how this stuff should be included in the training. Yes, it should be included in the training, but it's not new. It should have been included in the training from 10, 15, 20 years ago, and the DVSA chose not to pursue the route of a professional qualification that could have covered a lot of this stuff. Lost my train of thought. Where were we? So I believe that we live inside this little box. Again, this is not exact. I just made a shape and put it on the presentation. That's my orange box. It's not PACT's. And the behavioural change side of it and the coaching side of it is our opportunity to do it. If I was able to edit this online, I would draw a tiny little square in the corner of that was about skills development, that was about getting people to test standards, because that's my view on the situation. And the rest of, so what would that be? About 15% of this orange box would be skills development, and the remaining 85% would be about behavioural change. Increasing, I think, was the term that was used, cognitive awareness of learner drivers through things like theory of planned behaviour, all the research that she referred to that has come out of the RAC, which is excellent. I've read a lot of it. I use a lot of it in our training, and the coaching, more advanced coaching stuff that Bob was referring to. It's not just about what do you want to do today? Oh, I don't know. If you're doing that, you're trying to tick a box on a standards check sheet, and you're not going to get behavioural change, long-term behavioural change through stuff like that. I'm going to leave you with this little joke. Sisyphus was a mortal. I like my classics. The guys on here who know me already won't know that. Sisyphus was a mortal who was condemned by the gods to push a boulder uphill forever. So he pushed it uphill, he started pushing it uphill, and then a little bit later, in this sketch anyway, he decides that he's going to make a living at it. He gets really good at rolling boulders up a hill. And we've got Terry on here being the guy who's kind of mastered this and rolled it up the hill. We've got Bob holding a boulder up here. Chris is still working on it down there. And this is Lee. I don't have time to add anyone else in. The DVSA do not care about your development beyond standards check. If you want to develop beyond standards check, it's on you to go and figure that out.
Stress. It's the number one reason people have for being and taking time off work nowadays. And it affects all of us to some degree. Some stress is good, some stress is bad. But unfortunately, as self-employed people as we are, and all the stresses of that, we can't afford to take that time off work. So it behooves us not to get so stressed. Also, with all the things that we find on the roads, whether it's bad drivers or the people that you're driving with. all of that adds to stress. And the brain actually maps the car onto your body, so your brain sees the car as your body. This is why people get so stressed out when people come close to them in the car, because they see it as a fight or flight situation. So whenever you're in the car and whenever you're driving, it's fight or flight. It's going on in the background, and all the stress hormones are drip, drip, drip being dropped in there. Also, all the other stresses, like the standards check you might have to do, and all the other things add up, don't they? So what we're going to do today is I'm going to teach you how to breathe properly, which will help you to have more energy and help you to come from a more relaxed based state in life, so everything's easier. Stress won't affect you as much. Once we've done that, I'm going to show you some handy dandy techniques to calm down and relax whenever you want. I'll say you're in a very stressful situation, to just stop that stress immediately. So we'll talk more about those as we get to them. But first thing, since we're learning so much this evening and there's a lot going on, it's good to calm the mind, just relax and get into the body to allow us to take in more information. And this will help you with a thing called interoception, which will help you get some inside feeling as we go through these exercises. So the first thing I'd like you to do is sit nice and upright, shoulders over your hips, nice and balanced, head sitting on top of your neck. And just close your eyes for a moment and fidget about, get comfortable. And once you're comfortable, all you're going to do is you can imagine that I've got a heat lamp. Now the heat lamp warms you and it goes through you, so it relaxes you inside and out. And as it goes down from the top of your head all the way out through the soles of your feet, it relaxes and carries the cares and tensions away, leaving only relaxation. But your part in this is to actively let go and relax as the heat lamp goes down. I'll guide it and you just have a go with it. Nice and simple and very relaxing. So close your eyes, please. Just feel as if I'm turning my heat lamp on and it's just beaming on the top of your head. It's just relaxing your forehead and it's relaxing the top of your head. Just feel the tension from your scalp melting as the heat lamp comes down the face, relaxing the top of your head, down to the eyes, relaxing your eyes, relaxing the space around your eyes. And it relaxes the cares from your mind. All of your face relaxes, the rest of your head warms and releases. And the warm heat lamp comes down now, just releases your neck, the front, the sides and the back. And it just flows gently down and releases and warms and lets go of the tops of your shoulders. And the stream bifurcates and comes down from the shoulders, down your upper arms, carrying that wave of warmth and relaxation and carrying the tension with it. So it flows down to the elbows. And go at the elbows feel as if they open like floodgates. The wave of warmth and relaxation flows down through your forearms, all the way down to your wrists, letting go. And it gets through the wrists open and expand, and it warms and relaxes the tops and backs of your hands and in your fingers, and the wave flows out. And you just come back up now. Just feel the heat lamp releasing the top of your chest. As it flows down, feel it flow through you, releasing your shoulders, letting go of the habitual tensions everyone carries in the shoulders. Your chest muscles release and relax as it goes down, softening and relaxing your heart. Flowing down, letting go of the belly. The wave of warmth and relaxation flows down and through you. As it gets down to the hips soften and release. Feel the wave flow through and down as it gets to the tops of your thighs. It carries on releasing and warming and relaxing the front and the sides and the backs of the thigh muscles. The wave of warmth and relaxation carries on down, getting to the knees. The knees feel as if they expand as they open. And they're just warm. The wave flows down all the way through the front and sides and back to the calves. Gets a bit harder in the calf muscle, so let go even more. There's a wave of warmth and relaxation goes down, leaving your mind clear and your body released and relaxed. It releases the tops of your feet, the toes, sides of your feet. As we get to the soles of your feet, feel as if your feet open up, just like giant black holes. And all of the cares and tensions and strains of life in the body and the mind flow down and out to be let go of. Now just sit there for a moment in that calm and relaxed state.
Okay, first of all, 5 things never to say to a neurodivergent learner. Don't worry, everyone's a little bit autistic. Do you take medication for that? That's a common one for ADHD. I have social issues too, but you seem so normal. And you just need to try harder. And generally that one comes out when you talk about ADHD and maybe concentration. That, okay, you can't concentrate. If you tried harder, you might be able to. Or things like dyslexia with spelling, reading, things like that. Again, people might say that. And it's just they access the world in a different way. That's the best way of saying it. So you may have heard the term identity first language or person first language. So identity first is I am autistic, whereas person first is I am someone with autism. Okay, and lots of research has gone on, and most autistic people prefer the term I am autistic. Okay, not I'm Jack and I have autism. Yeah, so it's I am autistic. But as I said, that's most, but it depends on the person. So listen to how they say things, listen to how they refer to themselves. If you're not sure, just ask them. Generally, I would say it's often when they're newly diagnosed, they might say I have autism, but they're more confident with their autism and things like that. They're more likely to say I am autistic. Okay, but do just ask. A couple other things. So I am happy to share that I'm autistic and I have ADHD. I'm older. I don't really care anymore what people think of me. I've got to that point where I'm just happy. I don't really care. However, my 15-year-old daughter isn't that confident. She knows she's autistic. She's on the CAM, she's on the waiting list and things like that. But there are stereotypes around autism. There are, if you watch various films, TV programs, Meltdown, things like that. And it is a spectrum. So there are people who may not want to say they're autistic to people. They might not want to share. They're not confident enough around that. So don't expect everyone to come out and say, I am autistic or I have autism. You will teach people who are not aware they are autistic or have ADHD. Like my driving instructor, I got diagnosed at 43. I obviously had it when I was 17, 18. It didn't impact me that much. And that last bit on there is a very generalized rule, is the earlier a person is diagnosed, the greater the need and impact. So there are lots of adults being diagnosed, but generally it's not they got through school. It might not be in greatest school, but they got through school without it hugely impacting. I think more and more at the time, you had to be very, I'll say the word very autistic, that's not great. You had to be highly impacted around autism or things like that to get a diagnosis and to get that educational support. And lots of people might have just been naughty or weird or that one or the weirdo, anything like that. They may have been autistic, they may have had ADHD, but it wasn't diagnosed back then. But they got through school, they've got jobs, they're living their lives. But they might get a diagnosis like I did later on in life. But if they're going to be, so maybe a lot of the 17-year-olds you teach or 18-year-olds, you might recognize some of the signs of being neurodiverse. And some of the things you'll see as I go through here, you might recognize some of the symptoms I go through or some of the needs that I talk about. But they may not be diagnosed. It's a whole conversation. Should you approach them? And I personally wouldn't. That's a big conversation. If you know them well, they're struggling, it really depends. I personally, in most cases, wait for the other person to bring it up. There is a big myth around eye contact. So I think about lots of people with autism don't like eye contact. Yes, some don't, but some do. I really don't care. Eye contact isn't a big thing for me either way, but I know others who really struggle with eye contact, and you'll have a really in-depth conversation with them, but they will just be staring at the floor or staring at a wall past you or not even in your direction. And some people feel that making eye contact is really important because it shows you're listening, it shows you're paying attention. And also when you're making eye contact, you do read more facial language, you can respond easier and things like that. There is great benefits of eye contact and seeing the face and things like that, but we can't expect it. We can't expect someone to give us eye contact if they don't feel confident. Now, as driving instructors, hopefully you should be driving down the road, making eye contact with your learners. Hopefully they should have their eyes on the road. So that does make life easier. But it does mean when you're stopped, don't necessarily expect them to look at you and make eye contact. If you're not sure they're listening, or they're not sure they're understanding it, there are ways to check that understanding afterwards. And if you give simple, clear, explicit instructions, and you can ask them to confirm it back by asking them to repeat the instructions or say it in their own way, or what they're going to do what you've asked. The eye contact is great, but you can't always expect it. But also, eye contact isn't a way of identifying if someone has autism.
Here we go, the theory test. A quick bit of maths to start with. 50 minus 42. Yes, correct. It's 1. So failing by 1, one of my favorite phrases that people will have possibly heard from me before. It's what I get constantly when I talk to people who've not been successful at the theory test. I find it incredibly frustrating, but not necessarily because of them, because that's the way the test works. It's got this way of convincing people they're nearly there, almost like gambling. It's that same kind of, you're not quite losing enough to invest in doing, solving the problem. So yeah, it's really deceptive. Please don't fall into the trap. Don't let your pupils fall into the trap. Look at the process, try and support them with the process, or send them to someone who can, like myself, who can guide them through it if you don't want to. It's not for everyone. Not everyone enjoys doing the theory or feels comfortable doing it. That's fine, not a problem at all. So what we know is that the test is 0 to 50. It's 50 questions, and that the pass mark is at the 86%, so 43 marks. What I find is that on average, people can achieve 60 to 80% just by knowledge, just by working it through, by revising what they haven't learnt yet, which is a system I still can't understand why we use. But we're taught it, we learn it as part of our part 1 so often. It's not integrated training. What I would like to see is the part 1 and part 2 switched, because then I think we can focus on driving and then move towards part 1 knowledge being more about education. So that knowledge fills the gap for 60 to 80% of the stuff, but how do we bridge that gap in between? So there's 2 factors, 2 areas that I've identified that I label as understanding and comprehension. Now, arguably, there's a bit of a crossover. I go with understanding being technical knowledge. It's a technical subject, so there are words that get used that they might not ever have come across before. Maneuver, no 17-year-old uses maneuver except for in a driving context. None of us can spell it, so I like do. It's the concept of it. It's how does it fit together as well, that level of understanding. And then there's the written English. It's a reading written test. It's very heavily reading written. So the comprehension comes under that as well. So it's not necessarily technical understanding of the words. It's also the ability to do it, to work through the question, to understand what's going on. To just refer back to what Dale was covering regarding additional needs, there tends to be a link between understanding, figuring out what that question means, and my pupils that have autism or ADHD and dyslexia is often a different challenge, because that's about getting it from the screen into their heads and comprehending it that way. But I haven't had a single autistic pupil who hasn't been right with the question. It's just not the DVSA is right when it comes to the answer. So sometimes that comes under that comprehension as well, and working that through, trying to figure it out and do it in the pupil's way. There is additional help available. I'll nudge Terry to post, because he's really good at that, knowing which podcast is which. Anything where we've covered that. And I'm sure he will also post the 5-minute theory, which is being sponsored by Theory Test Explained, and going to work with Terry on that one, which is great. So, I'm sorry, that's the understanding and comprehension bit. The rules. These are 3 things that are not taught very well by driving instructors. As in, all of the pupils I've taught theory, none of them have got this or been shown this as rules. Sorry. In English, we read from left to right. So hopefully that will make a bit more sense to you. In Chinese, they read from top to bottom. In Arabic, they read from right to left. So knowing these rules means that we can easily predict what's happening, understand what's happening, and know what to expect from other people. And some of the things that Dale was talking about, that ability to understand and know what's going to happen, reducing anxiety levels. It also reduces crash levels on the road. So the 3 rules that I absolutely accept, all instructors demonstrate and all instructors encourage, and we might say when they're driving down the wrong side of the road, we drive on the left in this country, don't get taught as rules specifically. In my experience and my pupils' experience, it's coming from lots and lots of different instructors. We drive on the left. It's the left-hand drive system. We overtake on the right. 4 exceptions for that. Every rule has an exception. I thought I'd found one that didn't, which was don't hit stuff, until one of my PDIs said accept the brake. So every rule has an exception, and that's part of where I start. But there's 4 exceptions that I can find for overtaking on the right. If you've got a keep left arrow on the back of a lorry to take the one out of the theory test, but an order sign telling you to overtake on the left, fine. One-way roads, and remember that a one-way road is a big thing. It's not the little cut through. People always have in their head this little cut through, and pupils will say, well, I can't overtake on a one-way road because of all the parked cars, or it's not wide enough. So trying to make sure they understand that one way could be a big road, and then dual carriageways and motorways, but you can't turn right on a motorway, so only when they're turning right on the dual carriageway, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but those are the exceptions. And then we drive clockwise. That's not just roundabouts. If you go to a petrol station, it's clockwise. If you go to a car park, it's naturally clockwise. So these defaults are really important. And by making sure that they are overt as rules and not just this is what we do, it will help them with the theory test, because when they read those questions, that's the construct, the model inside of which they'll be working.
So how do we use social media to benefit us and to drive sales and get students? I'm talking to you guys kind of as if you haven't started yet. So forgive me, because some of you might know this already, but I understand that it can seem super overwhelming when you're starting out. So I'm going to give you some reminders, and then I'm going to give you a really solid way to start a foundation for a great social media presence. First of all, start small. You don't need to think about the fact that you've got no followers and that you're meant to have 1,000. You don't need to expect to suddenly be getting contacted by students in the next 3 months for lessons. You are starting. And if you start thinking too big, you become overwhelmed and you won't do it. Second of all, and this is a really important one, you don't need to understand the algorithm. The algorithms, A, it's always changing, B, it's different for every platform. See, I don't even get it. And I sometimes, I mean, I'm a bit of a geek about it, I admit, but sometimes I'll be reading about it till midnight and I'm like, I've got no idea still what I'm supposed to do. The upshot is that the algorithm just wants you and the people viewing your content to stay on their app for as long as possible. That's it. So that's why they do things like trending sounds, because if you put a video to a trending sound, you have to do that within the app itself, which means that you're in that for longer. That's why they promote trending sounds, because they know that you've been editing it in the app, so you've been on the app for longer, and therefore people will more likely to view it. You don't need to understand that. You just need to focus on creating content that reflects you best. This has been something that somebody, I'm sorry, I can't remember who to, but somebody's already said this, and I've already said it. Start now while you're busy. The best thing about what you do is You are your content, you are your brand, you are what you are selling. So if you're busy and you have test passes and you have really amazing teachable moments, or a moment in the car with a student where they've had a breakthrough, that's all content. That's all displaying why you're good at what you do. That's content. And nowadays, I think, you know, obviously you have to ask permission from your student, but nowadays that's not a problem. People are quite happy to be on other people's social media, especially when it's someone who they've developed a relationship with. Obviously ask permission, but the fact is you just need to get used to the idea that you are the content, and while you're busy, you've got that content for days. So the other thing you have to think about is you're not competing against other bigger accounts. When I first started doing social media in this way, I think the company that I was working with was one of a handful of companies that really wanted to grow their social media presence and YouTube presence to a point where they would monetize. Now there's a lot of really amazing driving schools out there that are doing their stuff on YouTube and TikTok and monetizing from it. But I cannot explain to you the work involved in that. And that's like a whole nother job in itself. If that's what you want to do, that's fantastic, because there's always room for new people, but that's not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is start your brand and get you into a position where people remember you and they want to work with you. So we have to have a strategy. If we don't have a strategy, then we don't do it, because it all becomes overwhelming. The most important thing about a strategy is making sure that it's manageable for you and that it works for you. So consistency is key. And what I mean by consistency is not showing up every single day. What I mean is thinking about your time limits, your budget, what you think is doable for you without becoming overwhelming, or you just stopping it altogether. I think a lot of people really go by like the three days a week rule, so on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday to start off with, until they kind of build it into their day. But there's no point in starting with, oh my gosh, I have to post every single day, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, because it's too much. And then, you know, wherever you're getting that content from, you haven't built a catalogue yet. So when you're building your strategy, the important things to think about are, why are you doing this? What channels you're using, what are you saying, and who is listening? So getting started, the most important thing is to think about your why. Why are you using social media? What do you want out of this particular type of marketing? Are you looking to build brand awareness? Are you looking to generate sales or pick up new students? Do you want to build relationships? Do you want to capture data from your chosen demographic? What is it that you want? I imagine that with driving instructors, it's kind of across the board, building brand awareness, you know, generating leads, building relationships. But you need to be clear about what it is that you want to do, because that will dictate what kind of thing you post. So let's say that you've gone away and you've had to think about what it is that you want to gain from using social media marketing. Now we need to think about the platform that we want to use. So I have this argument with people all the time. Just listen to me when I say this. Facebook is the most used social media platform in England in 2023, but it is not the most used platform in 2023 for our target audience. Facebook is more likely to be used by over 35-year-olds than any other demographic. It's something like between 35 and 65, and there's like a new wave of people over 70 using Facebook. That's great, that's wonderful, but that's not who we're trying to sell driving lessons to. So the two platforms at this moment in time in 2023 that are most used by 16 to 35-year-olds are Instagram and TikTok. Now, I like TikTok. I think it's got a really good place. I think it's very kind of clickbaity. You can find yourself spending hours on it. I think there's some really great schools out there doing some really great TikTok. But in terms of you trying to generate leads, I think it's quite a tricky platform to navigate, because a lot of it is video content. They are in the process of introducing photo only content, but that isn't happening across the board yet. And I do think, even I find it quite tricky to navigate. If you're quite new to using social media marketing, I think we start with Instagram, because Instagram is really, really great. It's got lots of different options for you in terms of posting, so you can do what's most comfortable for you, but also you can actually link your Facebook and your Instagram because they're both owned by Meta, which means that what you post on Instagram automatically goes to Facebook, and suddenly you're managing 2 platforms.
So it's time to go back. But first, let's have a look at the present day. So we start back in good old 2023, and we start with DVSA's Ready to Pass campaign, focused on making sure that our pupils are ready to pass their driving test, making sure that we know that our pupils need to be ready to pass their driving test. We also consider a 6-month waiting time for driving tests. It's terrible at the minute. Nobody can get a test. If you've got a test and you're not ready for it, then you're looking at putting it back or paying extra money to get a test that is suitable to when you might be ready. We've also got the dreaded trigger system, DVSA's TIP program that ADIs and PDIs alike are now on and monitored against our test results. Feels like that a lot sometimes. We've got issues with ADI tests and the fact that they have to go on hold, so PDIs struggling for part 2s and part 3s in addition to 6 months waiting times for driving tests. What that's leading to at the minute is a test-focused industry. Everything within our industry currently feels like it's focused to tests. So are you ready to go back? Let's go back. Let's get out of good old 2023. So we're going back to the future. We're going to a place where, well, actually, where we're going, we actually don't need roads. What we need, though, is research. We're going to go back and have a look at the research that went into client-centered learning. Research that actually seems to have been largely forgotten currently, with all of the focus to test. It's easily forgotten that actually our focus should be on the pupil, the client-centered learning, and the benefits of that to our pupils driving post-test. So if we go back first to 2014, the 7th of April 2014 specifically, that was the date that the standards check replaced the old check test. We're having to go back 9 years now from the check test to when client-centered learning was actually brought into the way in which driving instructors are assessed. It's often felt by driving instructors that this change happened overnight, that DVSA just woke up in the morning and decided to mess with what we did back then and what they did back then and the way in which they needed to do it. But actually, the origins go back, and we must go back even further from 2014. If we go back to 2011, that was the year in which the national standards for driver and rider trainers were published. They were actually published on the 31st of October. So whilst all of this currently is a nightmare for driving instructors, the date in which the DVSA published the national standards for driver and rider trainers, which are the origins of the standards check and the competencies, they were actually published on Halloween in 2011. But in order to understand the origins of the national standards for driver and rider training and the implementation of client-centered learning, then we must go back even further. We must go back to the good old days of 2005, where the merit report, the merit project was published. So merit was the minimum requirement for driving instructor training. That basically was a report which suggested that the way in which driving instructors, PDIs, are trained to be ADIs needed to change. And this goes all the way back to 2005. It looked at how best to develop driving instructor training, and it took the view that driving instructor training needed to look at the goals for driver education matrix with a top-down approach in order to create safer drivers. Drivers who were trained around the contributory factors in collisions. So now we need to go back even further, because if we're going to find the contributory factors into the goals for driver education matrix, now we need to go back all the way back to 1999. And Great Scott, there is our Great Scott, Mr. Stewart Lochrie, a good friend of ours who is a big advocate of the goals for driver education matrix. He didn't actually invent it, but he is a big advocate of it, and he's a Great Scott. So let's go with that. The matrix is widely accepted to contain all the elements of training required to create safe and competent drivers. And it's the framework with which we need to deliver our training as trainers to driving instructors and PDIs, and with which they need to then deliver their training to pupils in order for them to create drivers that are more self-aware, that understand their own risk increasing factors, and go beyond just simply understanding the need to control a vehicle and navigate through traffic. So that surely must be it. If we're going back that far, it's 24 years. But no, we must go back further. We must go back further to understand the origins of the GDE matrix. Where did that come from? The matrix itself was formed in 1999 by Hataka et al. But we must travel all the way back further to 1980. Travel all the way back to 1980 with a short pit stop in 1996. The origins of the GDE matrix lie in the theory of internal models of driving behavior. So this was created, this theory, by Mikkonen and Keskinen in 1980, and it was updated in 1996. So that's a hell of a lot of going back that we've done to understand exactly where client-centered learning and its origins were formed.
So first of all, and I kind of touched on this before, but big thank you to everyone for turning up, mainly the speakers. Obviously, I think they've all been awesome, but also you guys, especially if you stayed all the way to the end. If you're a podcast listener and you get to the end of my podcast, you'll hear me refer to you as elite listeners, because you've stayed all the way to the end. So my favorites. So if you're all the way to the end of this, you are my favorite people now. So, well done. Thank you. Also want to mention that I said it a couple of times to people that today was either going to be amazing or abysmal. It's been amazing. I've been really, really impressed with the presentations. I mentioned it there. Really thoroughly impressed with what everyone has done. At the minute, I can't pick a favourite. I'm looking forward to going back and watching them properly, because obviously I've been distracted. So I'm really looking forward to going back and watching them properly. And then the last two things, these are the two things I'm going to ask of you. These are my calls to action, Laura, my calls to action. First of all, if you have enjoyed this overall, so you may not have enjoyed every single aspect, but if you've enjoyed this overall or gained benefit from it, do me a favor, go and shout about it. Either leave me a review, you can do that on my Facebook page, you can do that on my GMB listing, anything like that, or just go and put a Facebook post or an Instagram post, or don't tweet or X, because we don't deal with that shit, but go and, do that, tag the Instructor Podcast in it, raise a bit of awareness for me and say how awesome it is, so all the people that didn't attend can start to feel sorry for themselves, because you're the awesome folks that attended, and hopefully, I'm pretty certain, come away from this better instructors. So go and give me a little bit of love. But above that, above everything, pick a couple of people you've enjoyed today. Pick a couple, if all of them, hopefully, but pick a couple. go and follow them on social media, go and leave them a review, go and give a separate post where you're talking about what you learned from this one. Do that publicly. These guys have just given you their time for free, and I don't want to bang on about that too much, but they've just given you their time for free, including Lee that's just turned up at 9 o'clock at night to do this. Maybe they'll make the next one a bit earlier. Either way, so go and give them some love, not just in the group, but please do it in the group, obviously. That's what the group's for. But go and do it publicly, raise some awareness around these guys, not just the folks in the industry, but the folks outside it as well. I'd really love that, and I'm sure they would as well. The full recording will go in my premium content. If you want to find out more about that, www.instructorpodcast.com, or message me. 10 quid a month, you get a load of stuff like this, but not usually 3.5 hours, usually 30 minutes. And yeah, bye. I'm saying that, but I'm not ready to stop bloody sharing and stuff, so it wasn't very dramatic, was it? I'll try again. Bye.